Hello, hello. Welcome to the JTM Community Podcast, where we are building a community that you can bank on. I'm your host, Jason Melvin. If you are watching this, you already know who our guests today are. They've both been on here a time or two in the past. Before we get into all of that, if you want to touch base, nice, Will. If you want to touch base with me for advancement advising, you can do that through j-tm.community. And if you want specific podcasts, just add /podcast at the end of that and go right to where the podcast stuff is. Of course, if you enjoy our content and you like watching or listening, hit that like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the things. Of course, on the top right of the site are all of the links for our various social medias. For your convenience, check out our Facebook group that you'll get immediate notifications of episodes, of every poll that goes live for your votes for future podcasts on Mondays. You can engage with the community, ask questions, add your own thoughts, share your own stories, help motivate and inspire the community there as well. Without further ado, today we are going to be talking about heroes in honor of Memorial Day. So as of this recording, Memorial Day was this past Monday. Today is part one of a two-part that we'll be actually recording just after this. So thank you, Will. Thank you, Mason, for joining in for these two episodes, actually. So to start off, when you think of that word heroes, I feel like it can be loaded and based on people's life experience and exposure could mean many, many things. So let's start with you, Will. When you think of heroes, what comes to mind? What does that mean?
For me personally, it looks like somebody that holds a very high standard of the moral system and things that I hold true to myself. So like looking at people and going, they step out of their comfort zone and they do things that I'm always looking at and admiring. For me, it would be honesty, truthfulness, loyalty, stuff like that, bravery, courageousness, all those things that you think about, and then maybe not jumping out in the middle of the actual community and saying, "Hey, look at me," but just doing that in their everyday life, even when not a lot of people are watching them, just making sure that they're always doing that. That's somebody that's a hero and that, takes a chance to make other people's lives better, and then possibly putting themselves in harm's way to protect and serve others. So
kind of the idea, it's not just the action, but the character of the person.
Yeah.
Okay. When you think of that idea, Mace, of heroes, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so for me, I do completely agree with Will. I think it has a lot to do with characteristics, but I also think that as we look at a hero, or what I would view to be a hero is going to be different than you or Will or anybody else, right? Because ultimately it's a person that we're inspired by, that we aspire to be, or we would like to be more like, right? So usually it's those characteristics and qualities that are extremely difficult to embody for a lot of people. So for example, selflessness, like Will was saying, right? And you got like doctors, teachers, police officers, nurses, paramedics, like firefighters, all these people that either are putting their lives on the line. They're doing something that's risky, but really they're doing it for other people too. So that is something that a lot of people, we're more about ourselves. We want to make the bigger buck, to have a bigger house, drive a better car. And that's a little bit more self-centered. So when we look at these other individuals that don't do those things and they, but play a very important role in our community, I think that's when we start going, oh man, those are those good characteristics that we would say are hero type qualities.
That makes sense. Those two things, both what you said and you, Mason, kind of tie together very, very well. It's the same kind of ideology with a highlight on that the character and the actions are for the good of people beyond that person themselves. when I think of hero, I think three common things come to mind. And it's the misconception that I feel a lot of people will have, is that they'll first think of somebody that they might admire, right? And I would distinguish that from somebody who would be a hero. And they could be the same, but they don't inherently have to be. Somebody who might be a role model, you might be easy to say that that person is a hero. And just like somebody that we might admire, it could be, but they're not inherently the same. Because somebody could be a good role model and not be a hero, right? You could admire a person and them not have those characteristics of a hero.
And the same thing that goes forward. Mason put it beautifully, because we think of doctors, teachers, military, fire, first responders. And that's where the thought of the actual character of the person comes back into play, because we know that humans generally, just in normal society, are not always good people characteristically. Like sometimes people are just crap people. So just because they're in that profession doesn't make them a hero. You have to also look at their actions, inside and outside, and make sure that there's somebody that's worth looking up to. And I think a lot of people kind of start taking it as, well, just because they do it, just because they do that profession. And other people are looking at professions like athletes and things like that. And yes, they have a platform to be looked at as admirable or somebody to be admired. But that's where I can't really draw a line straight to, like, hey, this person, just because they're a very big athlete, is my hero. Yeah. So you have to also look at the character and what they do.
Yep. So I think for me, and this was actually more recent, I've always had, my heart's always gone out to military, both my upbringing and the people that I have looked up to most in my life have been, have had characteristics of kind of valor and the ideology that goes with like an older generation of military, right? So that's what comes to my mind. And then over the years, especially recent years, is when I've began to distinguish those two things, right? Because I used to apply the idea of heroism to anyone that would go into the military, because there's a level of them that they're willing to put themselves in harm's way. And then as I've understood the process more and have seen how some people act in that, I began to understand that was where in the past I couldn't distinguish between the two, because heroism was based on a role they did, but not on the character of the person. Because I've seen some military people do some really shady shit.
Yeah.
Right. That would be the antithesis of heroism.
Well,
right?
You've seen there's a lot of places there's a lot of, like those ones that Mason mentioned, that have people in them that have done some shady crap.
Yep. I thought it's Dr. Kevorkian when we said doctor. So
yeah.
And again, there's a level of perception that goes into that as well, because somebody could have seen Dr. Kevorkian as an example and thought, hey, there's somebody doing like a service to humankind. So there is a level of perception that goes into this. So by no means am I saying that I'm right. It looked like you were going to say something, Mason.
Yeah, I wanted to define it down a little bit further, because I think the characteristics, like you could have, I mean, even take like a superhero, like fictional, right? Like you have Superman. If you embody all this good stuff, like characteristics, nobility and truth and all that stuff, but then you're just sitting around your fortress of solitude by yourself or in your basement, and that's all you do with those characteristics, are you really a hero at that point? No, I would say that it's defined by your actions more. Like you have to have those things inherently within you. But then, like, if you really think about what we say is real heroism or a heroic act, that's that person that runs into the burning building to save a child that they don't know. They just hear calling for help, right? So the person that's willing to act and put their lives in jeopardy or at risk to help somebody else, even if they don't know that person.
Yep. No, I think that's exactly key. It's these two things in combination, right? It is the characteristics that leads to the willingness to engage in the behavior, to which for me it comes down to this last point, and it's that idea of you put yourself in harm's way, and I don't mean that just physically, knowing that there is a significant risk to you, but that sense of you don't have a choice. Like, you have to do this because it's the right thing to do. So I can think of all of the first responders and strangers, anyone who ran into the Twin Towers on 9/11, right? As like a pivotal point that most people listening to this would be like, yep, that's a hero quality. I would also argue somebody like Jordan Peterson, right? Having open conversations that are objective, yet puts him in the spotlight to be shit on, to be the target of kind of mainstreamish culture at the time. And that's shifting a bit, but the willingness to do that, and that sense of I don't have a choice because I would be dishonest if I didn't say the truth, essentially, or approach things in that way. To me, that those qualities, even though it's not physical harm, for me still fall under the idea of heroism. If I think of Martin Luther King, right, would be another one of those, right? So a hero, at least initially in ideology, and then that transcends to action and so on and so forth. So it's, yeah, at the end of the day, there has to be the action, but that action, from my understanding, is motivated by those characteristics. Does that make sense or sound like bullshit?
No, that's exactly it.
So if that is what we agree is a hero, what is somebody in your life personally, and you don't have to disclose a name or anything like that, but as you think of this person and a direct connection to you, right? So I don't want to use somebody like Jordan Peterson or Martin Luther King, right? But somebody that you've had, maybe they're still in your life, right? That you felt, hey, these are characteristics. This is somebody who I view as a hero. So not necessarily as somebody you admire, or somebody that's a good model, but somebody that, based on what we just talked about, you'd qualify as a hero.
You want to go first on this one, Mace? Unless you have one already, because I'm debating between a couple.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty limited in my personal life. It's really hard to find those kinds of people. So I do have a really good friend. We've been friends since high school, who is a paramedic. I do know him to have saved he's been doing the profession now for like 20 years. So he's saved a ton of lives. I've heard so many stories about going into a location to help somebody, and then, that those people that they're going in there to help are either combative, they have weapons on them. So they are putting their lives at risk frequently when they go do that. So that would probably be the closest, when we talk about actions and people doing certain things, probably the closest it would get to me or for me. However, it's hard for me because I feel like there's a level of, like, you should look up to somebody or want to emulate somebody that's exhibits those heroic qualities that we talked about, but I don't really have those kinds of people in my life that I strive to be like. So that's why it's difficult.
Yeah, and I would agree. For me, there's definitely more people that I admire or that I feel are good role models that I look to. But when it comes to those qualifications of a hero, for me, it was actually a faculty member at CMU who we had paired with through private practice, and I worked with him a bit on the side as well. He's not there anymore, and he's alive. He just had moved on from the college, but he was not just a faculty member, but he was also a mental health practitioner. And much of what Mason had just said, he would spend a lot of his time and money on his own to travel all over the world and provide those services, and not just mental health services, right? He would go into places that were really risky, and he would help them essentially build the community, and sometimes quite literally build the community and put things together in buildings, but also had this skill set to help with some of the mental health things, which in the areas that he was traveling in, he would put himself in, even the idea of mental health help was a novelty, right? Because you're talking about safety, survival, those kinds of things were at the forefront. So I always thought that it is a really cool thing to do, and something that I did admire, and that was a bit of a model for me, but definitely had those heroic aspects to it, to the point where I strongly contemplated trying to do that myself, which I don't know if it's I want to say it's a blessing, because if I say it's a curse, it's going to sound terrible. So being blessed to have family and a relationship here made doing those kinds of things very, very difficult to be able to do. But I definitely seriously contemplated that at a moment because of his actions and hearing those stories. And I feel like a hero can tug at your heart in the most wonderful of ways.
They definitely makes it.
I actually think, people like that do those selfless acts. So even for somebody like you, Will, where you're a teacher, I know teachers get, I mentioned it earlier, but teachers don't get a lot of pay. There's not a lot of compensation. Even the fact that you guys as teachers have to do so much work behind the scenes, like after hours, that the kids and parents don't even look at, or like don't even recognize, that all that stuff, and like what you do, to me, is very impressive and very like, it's a hero's job for me, for most teachers, but I know you do it for the right reasons too. So that's why I can single you out, or some teachers are just doing it for the pay or the job. But it's like, for me, putting your heart out there, influencing young people's lives, hopefully trying to make them better, even if they're like dealt like a pretty bad hand or living in a bad situation. Like that to me is all like putting in that effort and that care. Like that's getting to know you has been fun, because I definitely look at those jobs too as very heroic.
And that's one of the things that it goes back to what both of you do as well. You know, the military puts themselves in danger, and we never hear about all of the crap that they go through. We hear about some of the good missions. We hear about some of the ones that went pear-shaped, but we never hear about the training, the mental toughness, all of the things that they have to go through every single day. And then what they come back to when they become civilian and have to work through, where Jason's job comes in and has to, help people through that. So both of your careers are tied very closely to that as well, because it's those big hearts, those changing people's lives, those heroes helping heroes kind of thing. Being able to just open up and share what you guys have gone through, and then people like Jason and in his career being able to help you through the stuff to help make sure that you get back to a fraction of what you were before you got back, from all the crap that everybody's had to go through, and try to make sure that, you can live a regular life again, or at least as close to possible. And that's, like you were saying, after getting to know both of you, that's what's been really big for me, is because I look at it and I go, I'm safe here. Like I have 60 kids that I get to work with, and they've all got things going on and we have to deal with that. But, you're overseas and then come back, and then Jason's group has to help people get them back into shape and just mentally tough again, or work through some of those problems. And that's hard. And heroic work that both of you guys are doing. So
I appreciate that. As you were saying that, it made me think of something. So I'm gonna ask a question before I give an explanation, because I kind of want to catch one of you off. Does context matter?
does content matter?
Context matter?
Context matter.
Yeah. So when we think of hero, does context matter?
I mean, if we're just shooting from the hip and going without taking a long time and pausing, but yes.
Okay.
I mean, you have to look at it and go, it doesn't depend on, it's not a level system for me. It's just,
sure,
did they do this out of the right reasons? Did they knowingly put themselves in the way, or did they do something to help somebody and go out of their way to do it? I would say context does matter, because if you're doing it just to get, likes on YouTube and Instagram, then no. That's to build yourself up. I mean, yeah, that's great that you're doing something good, but like there's been a whole bunch of that stuff lately where it's just gone, oh, here's something good that I did and I'm putting it on Instagram. No, it really shows a person's true character and heart when you do it and nobody knows about it, or very few people know about it, because it's the right thing to do, not because you're trying to get yourself boosted up in terms of promotions or internet likes.
Sure. It's not for the accolades.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Mace.
I think the authenticity and sincerity of a person really makes the difference there too, right? Like, so we talk about a term like unsung heroes, because usually people that are doing those heroic acts aren't looking to be in the limelight. So it's actually, you don't hear about those things very frequently.
Yeah.
Because most of those people are looking at it like, no, I don't want accolades for it. It was just the right thing to do. So.
Yep. And I think, again, we're going back to kind of the character of the person. So the reason why I asked, does context matter, is what popped in my head as you were talking about occupations and whatnot, was service workers. So like in restaurants, servers, waiters, waitresses, cooks, chefs, right? All of those people, typically we wouldn't have qualified that as a heroic act, right? I'm not saying not things to admire or to be models in their own ways. Now, when I change the context and I say, everyone's stuck at home, there's a killer pandemic going on, right? And these are the people who are putting themselves at risk so that you can have a meal, so that you can get takeout, so that you can do the drive-through pickup thing that people were doing, so that somebody can deliver food to you, right? Knowing that every delivery is a literal risk to them, right? So in that context, for me, it does change the way I viewed it. It does change the way that I saw the service that was provided. In a typical, at least in our culture, where we view people based on the jobs that they do, right? That's why people can be so shitty to customer service folks, right? Like they'll tear them up. Like they're asking you if you have your receipt. Like they're just doing their job. Like don't lose your shit on them. Like that's ridiculous, right? But in that setting, with the last couple of years, it made me view things differently. And I think for a lot of people, they began to see the humanity in the people, not just the job. Not all people, but I began to notice the shift. What do you guys think?
I definitely think that context did change it around a little bit. I think people were still being really crappy to the service industry.
Oh, sure.
Coming out of it because they're like that this is their job and they put themselves in it. No, they didn't have to sign up for a global pandemic and stay working, because
nobody signed up for that.
The thing that I would use to classify in context of that would be the fact that they kept working. There were so many people that just stopped. said, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to go home and keep myself safe, which, like you said, global pandemic.
Yep.
But the fact that those people kept doing it and kept out there working and kept putting themselves in that place, I would, in that context, I'd lean more towards yes, because they kept things semi-rolling while everything else was almost at a standstill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually going to go the other way with this one and say it would have to be, for me, a case-by-case basis. I think most people still were just working, doing their normal stuff. And if somebody would really like had a medical condition and they were fearful and, I don't look at the food service industry that way. Like if you wanted to go that way, that would be like the nurses and the doctors that literally were working with those people as the infections were coming in, and now they're putting themselves at risk. That to me would be like, yeah, those are the ones that are more on that. I mean, maybe it's a sliding scale piece, but
yep.
Yeah,
I mean, those two things are vary in extreme for sure. I mean, a doctor and a nurse in that setting, absolutely.
So yeah, I would be hard pressed to say like, hey, this person is doing heroic stuff just by whatever, cooking some food at a restaurant. But yeah, I mean, if somebody lived in a community that was on hard times and because people weren't able to work, and then that person went out and made meals for their community and
which did happen
and stuff,
which
did happen. Yeah, that to me is more where you start getting into like, wow, this guy's like a hero to this community. So, or gal,
Yeah.
So it's going above and beyond what your typical day-to-day behavior would have been then.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So even for a doctor and nurse, would you agree that there was a shift in level of heroism from what they typically would do to doing this in the last 2 years?
Yeah, I know a lot of them got either as they got themselves sick, not like on purpose, but as they're being overworked. I definitely know people in the healthcare industry. We're dealing with a lot. So yeah, that to me is super important to look at.
Yeah.
So definitely to kind of conclude that is context absolutely matters. It can kind of shift it in either direction, or do you think it can only shift it in the direction of heroism? I'm trying to think of an example.
It can go either way.
It can go either way, yeah.
It can go either way, yeah.
Can you think of an example that pulls like away from like acts of heroism or like the heroic deeds?
I mean, in the back of my head, there's something turning that just says, yeah, there's a time and a place where I know it I can't pinpoint it right now, but it just feels like there is a specific scenario, and maybe it's multiple, but there is a scenario where, yeah, you're doing it, like I said, just to get that recognition and just to get that notification, like that increase. And when you it goes back to that context. And if you're doing it to make yourself better known and go, hey, look at me, I'm working through the pandemic and I'm doing this, and you should all love me. No, we don't all have to love you, but we thank you for what you're doing, but stop trying to pull all this attention to yourself.
Yep. It kind of goes back to the intent. So you could be doing...
So it's an intent context. Yeah.
Yep. So if we break that down, what the three of us have agreed to is character matters. It's a prerequisite. Intent matters. And action is a requirement. So you can have a wonderful intent and beautiful character and never do a fucking thing. You're no hero. You can have decent character, do a wonderful thing, but with terrible intent to get fame, to get money, right? Not a hero.
No.
So it really takes that combination of those three elements to be what we would qualify as a hero.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So before we end part one and go into part two, I always like to take a couple of little nuggets. So what is a nugget at the idea of being a hero or the idea of heroism that you feel like would be helpful for folks who are listening or watching this to know?
I would say definitely make sure that your heart is in the right place. Mason said earlier, it's the heart. You know, make sure that your heart is in the right place when you do something. Don't just go out and do it for kudos. And don't put yourself out there if you're not. I mean, if you're not comfortable doing it and you feel it's going to be something that you can't get through, you know, don't just jump out there and try to put yourself into a bad spot just because you need to have that.
Please don't.
Don't just do it to try and be a hero and go, oh, look at what don't do that. Make sure your heart's in the right place and make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. Because sometimes there's a big quote that says, you live long enough to, you either die a hero or live long enough to be the villain.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. And so that's something that I would say is make sure that everything you do is out of the right purpose and that you know what you're doing it for.
Yep.
What movie was that from, Will?
Batman? One of the Batmans? I don't know. I mean,
I think so. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I've heard it a couple of different times, but yeah, which in our modern day, right? What defines the actual actions that define a hero, those change constantly, right? So things that used to be admirable now are almost viewed as a deficit of character,
or toxic masculinity.
Yes, yep, that would be one of those, right? So I think that really plays in a different kind of way to that quote. You either live that life or live long enough to become the villain in that sense, and that's in a depressing way is trying to highlight that the world beats you down as well. But
yeah, sorry,
turns you into Batman, if you will. So moral of that story, right? Live a life through your heart or become Batman.
Because or become Batman. I want to hear what Mason has to say because I know he's always got a pearl of wisdom in there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just being your genuine self. If you're, and most people don't get themselves into a position where they have to run into the burning building to save the child, right? But you're not going to do that if you don't already have those core characteristics about yourself. So really work on yourself first. Know yourself. Know why you're doing things, and do things for the right reasons. And then you're going to be the right kind of person that the world needs. I'll leave it at that.
I can't put that any better. So with those two nuggets of wisdom, follow your heart, be your genuine self, or become Batman. Thank you both for joining me for part one as we talk about heroes. Of course, if you're listening or watching, stay tuned for part two. That'll actually come the week after part one. So again, thank you both, Will and Mason, for joining me in this conversation. If you want to touch base with me for advancement advising, you can do so again at j-tm.community. If you want podcast specific stuff, add a /podcast to that. Without further ado, again, thank you guys. Thank you for all of you who have tuned in and becoming part of a community where you belong.